The armistice of 1918 stopped World War I fighting for good. Diplomats and journalists from all over the world came to Versailles, France, to come to a consensus of what would be done about the German problem. Leaders of the nations, the top four, such as David L. George, Victoria Orlando, Georges Clément, and Woodrow Wilson, would come up with a document on what could be done to the Germans to stop future aggression from happening. Now, Woodrow Wilson wanted to include fair treatment and something that would involve a peaceful post-war world. But the leaders did not want this. They wanted Germany to pay. They wanted revenge. They wanted blood. And because of this, the Germans would come back 20 years later, stronger than ever, and also seeking revenge. Because of this, the United States would enter a time of isolationism, at least until it was needed again. Between the end of World War I and World War II, America had associated itself in many small American interest conflicts in Cuba, Mexico, Russia, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and China. But for the sake of time in this video, we're only going to highlight some of the more important things. By the time World War II had been initiated, America was still holding on to its isolationist ideals, and FDR's Lend-Lease Act went into play. And in 1941, Roosevelt ordered the Navy to patrol shipping lanes to Europe in the spring. There were small conflicts between German U-boats and U.S. ships, and in November, the Neutrality Act was partially repealed to protect U.S. military aid to Britain. FDR didn't really want to enter the war, but he kind of did. He wanted to keep supplying the Allies. He didn't want them to lose, but he knew that back home, it wasn't something very popular. To keep focused on foreign policy, we're going to speed through most of World War II and really focus on the end. What's so special about the end? Well, I'll tell you. The ending of World War II is something that would forever change U.S. foreign policy. And I think you know what it is. War had reached a completely new level that no one saw coming. The United States positioned itself in the middle of the Korean War. It would defend the South because the North, the Soviet North, had started to invade. And to stay true to the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, the United States would defend any free countries from Soviet incursion. The foreign policy at this moment was to stop all Russian advances into different countries, to stop them from acquiring different satellite nations. The Cold War was in full swing. Soviet fear was rising in the US, and to protect our general interest, the government began more coups in Latin America, including aiding Castro's revolution in Cuba. As he rose to power, he eventually, to be frank, gave the US the finger, and tension began to rise in Washington, as that little island 90 miles off the coast was grasping communism. The CIA tried many assassination attempts on Castro and all failed. Till this day, the US funds terror organizations and anti-Castro rebellions in Cuba. The Vietnam War that ensued in the early 60s is a good example of how dark and twisted foreign policy had become in the US. The northern communist Vietnamese started going into the South. In such, Ho Chi Minh of the South asked for US aid, and instead got a demon that invaded the country, murdered and raped its people, and poisoned the country instead. The US to this day denies any of that, including the bombing of Laos that attempted to cut Vietnamese supply lines by dropping 80 million cluster bombs, and of that, 350,000 people died. Mix that in with the CIA's failed Operation Phoenix in Vietnam that killed 20,000 civilians as suspected communists. You can start to see a clear picture of how US foreign policy was at that time. The world, everyone, was scrutinizing the US.
Suddenly, Iran is no longer one of this country's strongest and most dependable allies in the strategic Persian Gulf area.
We're fast forwarding to 1980 at the State of the Union address. President Jimmy Carter states that the U.S. will protect the Persian Gulf region from anything disrupting the supply of oil. This happens because of the Soviet advance into Afghanistan. Why is this important, you may ask? Well, this is the first time that the U.S. has openly said that it will protect Middle Eastern oil as much as possible as a national security interest of the United States of America. One thing we have to understand, not as a nation, but as a species, is that war never solves problems. And that's something we really have to change in terms of U.S. foreign policy. It's not our job to determine what others can do. We as a human race have to come to a consensus that to evolve to the next level of life, to survive the coming darkness, we need to unite as one, not as blacks, whites, Asians, and even Spanish people, but as humans. And as you sit here and watch this video, I hope that you'll think about this, because there is another important fact that you have to remember. You are the future. Your kids are the future. Remember that. Because as a united people, there isn't anything at all that could stop us. The edges of the universe couldn't stop us. Remember that old saying, the sky's the limit. My name is Cesar Andrade. Thank you for watching my video.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.